land management. Okay, Edgardo.
I am putting on mute here. Thank you for this nice event. Let me just come here, all right, and move something here. Okay, here it is. All right. Hello, everybody. Well, as Aaron was explaining, I'm going to talk about historical ecology as a source of criteria for conservation and land management. Um, just to give you an idea from the point of view I am going to use, I find pertinent to let you know that my main research question is not on the landscape level, even though I used to manage landscape information, but I am in a finest level, namely, I am plant community ecologist, forest ecologist. So I am one of those guys getting into forest with boots and making surveys, counting how many tree species and how many individual per species are there, and measuring the trees. So my main research question is nothing new. Why some places are more biodiverse than others? What I find fairly novel is using not only preeminently biological explanations like species interspecific competition or pathogens for explaining why some species are dominant and why some places are less or more biodiverse than others. But I am trying to combine all of this with information from history. I am obliged, it's mandatory for me to do that because I'm working on secondary forest. Finally, I started my life as a tropical ecologist, and now I am expanding my research into Europe, because here in Europe you have a very well recorded um, um, you have very well recorded processes of land use and land abuse, so you can look into the history of the forests you are studying in order to try to figure out how Homo sapiens is affecting biodiversity and ecosystem characteristics like the capture of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So as you look here in this slide, basically...
Sorry, Edgardo, just sorry to interrupt, but we don't see your screen. I just see a black screen on mine.
You don't see my screen? Oh my God.
Yeah, so maybe...
Let me, thanks for saying.
Yeah, no worries.
You find it? No? Charla, Edgardo, whatever.
There we see it.
Now
You got it there?
it.
All
Yes.
right. Thanks a lot. Oh, thanks for saying. I deeply appreciate it. All right.
Now it's
yeah. I did something wrong. Oh my God. It's always the same. Charla, Edgardo, is it over there again?
So here we see it in the app version, but try to go to presenter view and we'll see if we see it.
Where did I click? What did I do? Oh my goodness.
I guess you could go on the slideshow tab on the top.
Yeah, but suddenly it is not responding here. Slide, etc. What? But do you see the slide? I can just move through and keep talking.
We can see it there, yeah.
Yeah,
yep.
I can just go through and keep talking. Otherwise,
yep.
Okay, all right. Okay. So on the left hand, we have a number of the many different sources of information people can use for reconstructing the history of any secondary forest. You can use information from taxonomy because you make your flora survey. You use biostatistics because you can standardize your methods for every place. For instance, I used to work on 1 hectare plots wherever I go. And then I can play with some math for analyzing the data. You can use very sound, reliable biological concepts and theories like natural selection, evolution, vulnerability theory, which is just the other side of the coin of adaptation by means of natural selection. You can use ecology. For instance, in ecology, we manage a so-called life history strategies and life history traits for understanding which species grow faster than others, which species respond better to human-made disturbance than others. But at the same time, if you really want to understand the forest, you need to ask yourself what Homo sapiens did. So you look into the historical records, into the chronicles, cadastres. You use ethnographics, mainly in the tropics where cadastres are very difficult to find, like in Eritrea, for instance, or Panama, Brazil, Ecuador, some of the Latin American countries I have been working on. You look into the pictures, the remote sensing, the historical pictures, the aerial pictures, and you use economics and the economic history of the place you are working, just to give you an idea of the many different kinds of information you can work with in order to assemble versions of the history of any of the secondary forests you can or you are working on. So I am going to tell you a little something about the ambitions and the major caveats of environmental impact assessments. Because I am convinced that historical ecology can boost land management by means of providing more precise information compared to environmental impact assessment. Secondly, I will try to give a step forward, to propose one way forward, which is the use of historical ecology for assessing which land uses of the past would determine better situation or a better status of current forests. Yeah. Unfortunately, I will not be prolific with the data and the examples, but just as a hint, I have already published information on neotropical and alpine examples. Thirdly, one recommendation for rulers, for statesmen, and for scientists. These are related to the importance of assembling multidisciplinary teams. We have heard about it today morning, for surveying the forests and their histories, not only for, I mean, what after Xavi, it was Melanie was talking about this morning. Yeah, forming people to multidisciplinarily understand nature and human nature interactions. And scientists and policymakers need to keep the spatial scales in mind. And finally, a few words about how to produce more historical ecology teams, how to help to have more teams like the ones you guys are working with. So let's start with the beginning. Ambitions and major caveats of environmental impact assessments. Environmental impact assessments are, I mean, when you are a biologist and the government asks you, hey, we are going to put a mine here, an open air mine here in this tropical area, nowadays covered by a tropical rainforest. And you are asked as a biologist to predict what is going to be the environmental impact of there. Well, we have a problem where whenever and wherever we try to do that, the environmental impact assessments deal with three major problems. First, tropical forest and also not so tropical forest but have too many species with too many probable combinations of interactions among species and with the environment, and this entangled set of interactions makes prediction very volatile, very shifting, if you prefer. And moreover, many species are poorly known. So the ecophysiology of many of those species is virtually unknown, and still we are asked as biologists to predict what is going to be the impact on the different species. Here in the graph, in the figure at left hand, we have just an example of one of my 1 hectare plots surveyed in Ecuador and Amazon. It is a poorly or not so biodiverse one. Here on the left hand, the number of species, some 72, 74 species, after some 400 individuals. So this is not the most diverse plot you can find in the Amazon. Still, it is a lot of different plant species. Second problem, Well, related to the first one, there are too many biotic and non-biotic factors, and these factors have a dynamics. They change throughout time, affecting differentially the species. So, as a consequence of that, ecology is not an exact, a precise science. We are a probabilistic science, more similar to, we use more statistics, not a hard physics, like, I don't know, Newton laws or something similar. So any answer we provide is probabilistic, not a fixed law. Finally, the third caveat we have is that the trees, the forests, and the processes we are dealing with last centuries, many centuries. And it is not the same to be a small seedling or sapling than a large tree. You are not affected in the same way by clouds or shades or human humans hurting you with, I don't know, a machete or something, or pruning or doing something like that. It is not the same when you are a small tree than when you are a large one. But humans rarely live more than 100 years. And I don't know many old men or women able to go to the field and make hard work in field biology as we do when we are young. So I'm afraid that the processes we are dealing with surpass our capabilities. So one way to cope with these caveats is using historical ecology for assessing. Okay, you make your survey of the forest today, reconstruct the history, and try to identify why this forest here has less biodiversity than another, for instance, or has retained as a carbon stock smaller than the other forest, just using history as a way of, as a source of information for answering all that. Please don't get crazy reading these too many words. Please focus on the bold written ones. When you are going to study a secondary forest for understanding environmental impact, at least the way for the type of research I'm making, I mean, it helps if you use the same research question for all places. Yeah, how many species are here? Trees, reptiles, mammals, etc. If you standardize your research question for everywhere, you get more precise information because you standardize your method. So in my case, you know what the question is: why some forests are more biodiverse and hold more carbon in form of biomass than other forests. Secondly, thanks to the first, you apply the same method for all places. In my case, I already said, all trees 10 centimeters diameter at base height or larger on 1 hectare plots. Secondary forest. Well, then you reconstruct the land use history of each plot and its surroundings. That's why the landscape is very important, because usually the plots you are settling randomly on the field, each one had a different land use history because I had a different landowner, for instance, but belong to the same landscape, just to a different landscape unit. So there are going to be historical and socioeconomic aspects common for the different plots you are working, and others will be particularities due, for instance, to family decisions during land use. Then you use sound by afterwards you gather your data, you know already how you are going to analyze numerically your data. Then you can take advantage of the fact that you are reconstructing the land use history in order to use both biological concepts and historical reconstruction for understanding the results of your figures. Notice that from this point of view, the world is conceived as a collection of different secondary forests, each one with a different land use history. It was a kind of experiment, non-conscious experiment made by Homo sapiens in the past, And you are coming now, many years afterwards, to gather the information related to what were the materials and methods used by Homo sapiens in the past and the results you are measuring today. The results you are measuring today are a legacy of what was occurring in the past. And in the past, during the past, there were two kinds of processes: biological processes, sensu lato, ecological processes, and historical, human-made processes, all of them interplaying. The evolutionary background of each plant species, for instance, plays a role, pre-adapting some plants to respond better to clear cutting, for instance, in the case of pioneer trees, are better pre-adapted than others to respond to disturbance for the case of shade-tolerant tree species. So at the end of the story, if you go to the field and make a survey of many different plots with many different land use histories, ranging from, I don't know, mining, livestock, shifting agriculture, slash and mulch agriculture, slash and burn agriculture, etc., you get a collection of forests with different forest health characteristics, and you put them all on an ordinate scale and identify there which land uses in the past were resulting today in better forests. So where I am, where's the next one? Okay, all right. I think I'm here. Is it? Let me check. Yes. Well, for instance, in South Tyrol and the Amazon, after making just 1 hectare plots on the Amazon, unfortunately, no chance for more, and still going on survey here on South Tyrol, northern, in the border between Italy and Austria, you find fascinating similarities, commonalities. You find that the ecosystems are quite fragile because of rainfall, strong rainfall in the tropics, because of steep terrain here on the Alps, still because of this fragility of the ecosystem and the risks of losing soil fertility, suffering landslides, etc. People make something similar. We can call it, if you are a biologist, a kind of convergent cultural evolution here, keeping open areas surrounded by thick forest, for instance. Yeah, the way of working, well, it is very handcrafted. I mean, the constraints imposed by the environment oblige not to use hard, large machinery. Sometimes in South Tyrol you find small machines for cutting the grass. Still, these machines are very small because large machines just fall down on the hill. So they clear cut small areas. They keep them surrounded by thick forest. They gain a lot of forest services thanks to that. They are keeping soil fertility, avoiding disasters, keeping water quality. When you are going to drink the water, it is not the same than having it full of mud, at least. Provide wild animal protein and resources here. People make some hunting, and here also hunting and even entomophagy. They get any kind of resources, wood resources, non-wood resources, etc. But moreover, here by means of burning, you are somehow fertilizing the soil by means of adding some ash. And here they used to bring the cows here during the summer. Of course, this is a picture made during the winter. Here, during the so-called transhumance, they leave the cows here, let them for some time, and then some months afterwards, somewhere in the winter, they take the manure from here and move it here in order to fertilize this soil here for the following year. That was the tradition. Now is made a little bit different. No time for talking about it. So here we have, just to provide you an idea, my apologies, this is in Spanish here. You have the data on years. You, in this case, for Amazonian secondary forest, you have the plots, each plot with a name, A, B, C, D, each one with a different land user in the past. The forest age is part of the results, not of the methods. something in plant community ecology is very uncommon. If I am choosing the forest stands at random for making my survey, the age of the plot is not is part of the plot's history, of the forest history. So here are the data for above ground biomass, this AGM, and the number of species for each 1 hectare plot here. But look into something very interesting. This plot here, 79 species, quite a young secondary forest, manipulated. The land user were Quechua indigenous families. Here, the youngest forest was devoted to livestock mainly, and then led to fallow during sometimes. This is fallow in gray. This fallow here is very manipulated more than the ones here, and that enhanced the number of species by means of disturbance. But compared with the Kübergl plot, that's in German, here on the South Tyrol, you have 24 species here in a 1 hectare plot. Roughly a similar number compared to the one here in the Amazon. In contrast, on the same area, you have in Kübergl on the Alps, you get 3 different tree species. So the human intervention here in Kübergl was effectively, I mean, it was a garden, the garden owned by a family, the family of Mr. Ernst Mahl. He had the garden, even roses and so on. And as a consequence, today forest is a it has a very high number of plant of tree species. If you add understory plants, the number is even higher. So rulers, statesmen, and scientists, what should we do? Well, I really make you a confession. The paper I'm talking to you about was published in Spanish in a journal directed by a former president of Ecuador, Mr. Rafael Correa. This is an elite in the, let's say, in the land use planning or economic planning and policy all over Latin America. That's why I published the paper in Spanish and trying to find a way for, I don't know, rulers and statesmen and stateswomen to try to learn a little bit more from historical ecology for better assessing what is going on with tropical forests. And then, well, I say the rulers should simply call people like you, Nicolo, or Iram, or Aaron, call them with taxonomists, statisticians, evolutionary biologists, ecologists, ethnographers, geographers, historians, etc. Send them to the field and ask them to reconstruct the land use history of every forest stand, and then check which land uses in the past in my own country, determined by my own set of cultures in my country, were better than the others, and thereby, as a statesman, I can promote some land use, some land use practices by means of, I don't know, credits for agrarian agricultural production, or put some taxes to the land use practices affecting more to nature in order to use that money to subsidize, to pay the fairly good or better land users, and by the way, reducing the interest on continuing practicing wrong land uses. And we, the scientists, need to remember one thing. When we are talking about the Amazon, when we are talking about South America, politicians think on what you find here on the left hand. But ecologists think on what you find on the right hand. Politicians think on countries, borders between and within countries. And we think about biomes, tropical rainforest, caatinga, tropical rainforest, savanna, deserts, etc. So when we are going to talk with the rulers, we need to remember that we need to find a common language, taking, for instance, these geographic aspects into account. So how to produce more historical ecology teams? Well, Melanie was saying this morning that it is not easy to find in schools teachers seeking for multidisciplinary teaching in the school. But sincerely, I think that if we in the universities organize field courses with young people and research teams with people from different disciplines and confront them on the field with the problems that are occurring over there and let them to formulate the questions, design the experimental designs, redundancy for achieving the answers to the questions they themselves formulated. They are going to learn a lot from each other, as I did with my collaborators here. Here are some biologists, an engineer, a chemist, a historian, economist, tourism expert, great naturalist. So no time for more. Thanks a lot for the kind of people collaborating with my job. And thank you guys very, very much. That's all, folks.
Many thanks, Edgardo. Many very interesting your talk. I don't know if we have here some questions. Well, in principle, we have not questions.
That can be too much a good or too much a bad thing.
No, I would like to know from your research, which sources do you use when you study the secondary forest diversity, apart from fieldwork? Do you consult some references, bibliographic sources, or?
Yeah, nice question. Well, I have found that when I am here in Europe, there is a lot of information on the cadastres, for instance, old maps. I have found the cadastres from the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. I am German speaker, so I can understand them very well. I have found maps. There is a lot of written information, um, the chronicles, but also elder people help. When I am on the tropical areas, particularly on the neotropics, you find it is the information, the written information is more elusive. For instance, people who were trying not to pay taxes during the colony period and afterwards were not providing enough information, and the cadastres were not as good as here in Europe. So when you are also on the tropical areas, in tropical forests, many, let's say, forensic information is missing. Forests are very warm. Tropical rainforests are warm and humid. So dead trees get putrid very quickly, and you don't find the cadavers in many cases. In contrast, here on the Alps, you find cadavers of trees very well preserved. You can even count the rings of the trees and figure out how old the tree was before dying. So by comparing tree populations from the Amazon and the Alps, the population structure of trees, I have filled some gaps of the land use history of the Amazon, because I didn't find some cadavers on the Amazon, yet I was able to interpret Amazonian data using alpine data. By using Kolmogorov Smirnos, for instance, for comparing the histograms of tree diameters for different species. So the information is ranging for virtually everything: oral tradition, military documents, people, elder people, wise key informants, land users, family interviews, walk in the woods. It is like it was told. Some Molnar was explaining, when you go to the field and you join the people working, you learn more. You get information not only from themselves, but also from your direct observations. So it is a wide range of information. Here in Italy, I am still using the cadasters. Fortunately, now I am surveying the Adriatic area of northern Italy near Slovenia, And as well as for South Carol, you get a lot of information in the form of chronicles. Each municipality has a historian, and you get a lot of information there. Satellite imagery, etc. Everything.
Okay, Edgardo, many thanks. Very interesting your lecture.